You're back at the Faculty Factory podcast. I'm Kim Skorupski at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas, looking at Dr. Carla Spagnoletti. Hi, Carla.
Hi, Kim.
Folks, let me tell you who is Dr. Carla Spagnoletti, MD, MS. She's a professor of medicine, the George H. Tabor Endowed Chair in General Internal Medicine, the Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs in the School of Medicine, the Associate Division Chief for Education at GIM, the Associate Director of Master's and Certificate Programs in Medical Education in the Institute for Clinical Research Education. All of this at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. Why don't you tee it up and let's get going?
Kim, as you mentioned, I had recently given a keynote talk and they kind of asked me to talk about my journey thus far in my career as a clinician educator specifically. And so I went about that in thinking, well, what's going to be helpful to the audience other than just hearing my story? And so I broke out telling that story into sort of my top 5 tips for successful clinician educator careers, and took it from there. And so just to provide a preview, my 5 tips, and I'll go into a little bit more detail as we go on. My 5 tips are to proactively develop your skills, let your mission drive your career, turn everyday work into scholarship, face and embrace failure, and build and maintain relationships. So that's kind of how I broke it out. You know, it made sense to me to put proactively develop your skills at the beginning, because I think that for me is what really set me on the right path and really gave me a lot of opportunities as an early career educator that I would not have had otherwise, had I sort of just come out of residency and went to work, you know, as a clinician educator directly. And so for me, I opted to do a medical education fellowship and a master's degree in medical education. And that was 2 years after my internal medicine residency. And it opened up a whole world out to academic medicine that I didn't even know existed as a trainee. And I think that that's pretty common. It taught me not only how to be a better teacher and educator, but it also taught me leadership skills and administrative skills and medical education research and scholarship skills. And so that really set me up well for pursuing a career as a clinician educator, where I still had time to see patients and enjoyed seeing patients and still do, but also be able to explore some other interests that I guess I didn't really realize I had until I was exposed to that.
You said a couple times how you didn't know that this was even an option. So how did you learn or discover or even get curious to learn about something? You know, it's one thing when you accidentally overhear something or read something and go, I didn't know that. But, you know, when you're in education, you're in the world, in the space, and what happened or who happened that got you thinking, maybe I should do that? I'm always curious how, because some people I feel like they know I'm a teacher. I love teaching. I love all the learning, and it's a no-brainer that I'm going to be a teacher. But I'm always a little bit, I guess, surprised when I hear people go, I kind of accidentally discovered education. Like, wow, really? Can you tell us the story of how you got there?
Yeah, I was one of those people from an early age who knew I wanted to be a doctor, and I was always like on the doctor track ever since I can maybe 5, 7 years old. I don't know why. I don't have any doctors in my family. I just had it in my head, and that was sort of what I fixated on throughout my education. And so when I was done with my internal medicine residency, my intention was to go into private practice and be a primary care doctor, which is what I had always wanted to do, always thought I wanted to do. And I pretty much, you know, kind of maintain that interest through my training. And for family reasons, I had to stay in Pittsburgh, which is where I trained in residency. And so I went and tried to find a private practice job, and believe it or not, and this is just crazy, 20 some years later saying this, there were no primary care doctor jobs in Pittsburgh. None of the private practices were hiring at the time.
Wow.
Which is, we've changed a lot. The landscape of healthcare has changed a lot, obviously, but I wasn't really finding a private practice job. And I was lucky enough to have a mentor. Her name's Melissa McNeil, who probably a lot of people listening might have heard of. But she was my residency track director, my women's health track director, and she knew me well because I went to medical school here as well. And so she said, "Hey, we have this Gen Med fellowship thing that maybe you should do, and if you do it, then we'll be able to have a job for you here, and you can stay within the division." And I said, "Oh, that okay. Well," so my eyes were really set on the I need a job. Um, didn't have any idea what I was getting myself into, to be perfectly honest. And I think because at that time, the Gen Med fellowship and the master's degree here at Pitt were very, very, very new. And so pretty much none of the faculty members that I had interacted with throughout medical school and residency were people who had been through a medicine fellow, Gen Med fellowship or Med Ed fellowship. And I just didn't really understand what that career path looked like. Our division was a lot smaller, and so we had a few clinician educators who were, very prominent and served as mentors. But as a resident, I only ever saw the clinical side of them. I didn't see what they were doing behind the curtain. So
Oh.
I really just fell into it because I needed a job. And then it opened up that whole world for me of things that I really didn't even realize existed.
Fortuitous,
Yeah, very
fortuitous.
much, very
I
much
love
so.
it. I love those kind of stories when you think, oh gosh, switching your lens from thinking that I'm being rejected, instead you're being redirected, or if things are disappointment, it's because there's something else coming down the line that is better. And that's clearly what happened to you, that the door opened and you went, huh, oh, now I see why I didn't get into private practice somewhere. I'm supposed to be here doing this. Thank you for
Absolutely.
sharing that, Carla.
The second one is I really recommend that people let their mission drive their career choices. And actually, this whole concept of, having a personal mission, vision, value statement is something that I learned when I was in fellowship. And I am a huge proponent and tell all of my mentees and all the faculty members that I work with that maintaining and updating one's mission statement is key in terms of making decisions about next steps in your career. And I was able to dig out my old, like 2005 mission statement, and kind of take a look at it and compare it to now. Back then, I was just really focused on wanting to be a really good teacher. Clinically, my area of interest was women's health, and I really enjoyed working with residents. And so my mission and vision was around becoming the best clinician educator that I could be, and making sure that our next generation of physicians were well versed in primary care and specifically in the care of women, and be able to teach while I was sort of pursuing my career as a doctor in that area. And so I was able to accomplish that. But one of the funny things at that time was, in order to get the job that I got here at Pitt, I had to be flexible because there were some needs that my division had that didn't necessarily align with that mission, vision, value statement that I had written for myself.
Uh-huh.
Um, the job that I was being offered allowed me to do the things that I just talked about, but there was also this need for developing a communication curriculum or patient doctor communication curriculum, um, from a earlier version of a medical interviewing curriculum that had been run by a faculty member for like maybe a decade before that. And she was leaving and they needed someone to take over it. And my area of expertise or interest was not necessarily patient doctor communication. I didn't really know very much about it other than what I had learned during residency here and there. And they really needed someone to take over this curriculum and build it and grow it. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. I did it reluctantly at first, But I ended up becoming really passionate about that as an area of interest. Did what I needed to do in order to get additional training, which kind of harkens back to my tip number one, is proactively develop your skills. And I was really able to base the first 10, 15 years of my career around teaching and studying patient doctor education. And I went on to become a course director at the medical school for medical interviewing. And of course, I developed a 3-year longitudinal curriculum for our residency program, and then taught our master's level teaching communication skills course for many, many years. And that kind of got me into the patient experiences area. So I was doing education, I was doing research, I was doing scholarship around all of those things. And, that really helped me in terms of getting promoted and meeting people and getting other opportunities, and really just proving myself as an educational leader and a educational researcher. So
Wow.
it all kind of, again, serendipitously, I was kind of like doing it because I had to, and it turned into something that I really set me on a fantastic trajectory and really set me up for success, and sort of brought me where I needed to be up until maybe 5 years ago. Because concurrent to that, I was developing an interest in professional development and faculty development, and really getting interested in helping fellows and junior faculty kind of pursue a career similar to the one that I had been pursuing, and just trying to do things and be there for them to make it easier to figure out how to do it. So at that point, about 5 years ago, I kind of gave up the patient doctor communication stuff largely. I not gave up, but I handed it over to mentees of mine, and put those things in good hands, and kind of made that switch more into the faculty development space. And of course, as I was doing that, I was revising my mission, vision, value statement, and that really helped me figure out what are the things that I should say yes to, and what are the things I should say no to. And I think that that is helpful all the time, but it's also mostly, I would say, most helpful at a time where your career is changing, or you're at a pivot point, or you're at a place where you could choose, to go left or right. Having that is what really helped me to figure out what are the things I'm going to let go, and what are the things I'm going to keep, and what are the things I'm going to say no to, and what are the things I'm going to say yes to. So that, really, really helped frame my decision to sort of pursue faculty development, faculty affairs, a little bit more than I had been before. I had been a Gen Med Ed fellowship director for like 10 years during that whole time, but I was ready to kind of take on bigger positions, and that was sort of that turning point for me.
I love that lesson, really important lesson you described here in terms of being flexible, and how you mentioned when you were first learned that there was going to be this gap, and because someone was leaving and you were you said, I'm reluctant to do it. Then I ended up loving it. So to me, that is an important lesson to see the yin yang, that the both sides that can exist simultaneously. One of having a very clear mission and doing things mission centric and aligning your yeses with the mission, also while having the emotional intelligence enough to know that when there is a gap or a need, even if it feels like it may be a little uncomfortable or you're reluctant, that recognizing, stepping into that, we really don't know, as long as it's not too far afield, or maybe even if it is far afield, that you could also then step back out of that. So I saw that, I learned from you that you can do both of those things. We can do uncomfortable things that you never know what will, how that will amplify. And then in seasons of our career, we can adeptly step out of that, like you demonstrated. Then you hand off, as every good leader should, give opportunity to someone else to grow. So I like that, being able to, or how you've shown that you can step in and out of things and be delighted by what, you might uncover there just by pure, seemingly pure accident.
Yes, yes, that's a great summary. It's kind of funny that my next tip is face and embrace failure, because a lot of the things that ended up turning out really good were as a result of, some sort of failure, something that I tried or wanted that I didn't get, or, wasn't the right time for me. Um, Even that early example of me trying to get a private practice job in Pittsburgh to be a primary care doctor, that I failed at that and went into my fellowship, and, really that changed the course of my career. And I remember being really sad and sort of upset, and just thinking, wow, like I did all of this training and this is always what I wanted to do, and now I can't even get a job. Like that's really sad, right? And so that's just one of things. I mean, I'm a big proponent of applying for things and trying for things, even if the odds are against you. Even if you meet some of the criteria, but not all of the criteria, even if you know that there's someone out there that's more likely to get the job than you are. And I tell my mentees that all the time. And so there have been a few major leadership positions that I applied for along the way as I was trying to shift my career, and be a little bit more focused in the faculty development area. But the most the most recent one is the job of the vice dean for faculty affairs for my institution. Became open as our new dean was restructuring the office. And I had been really trying to think about ways that I could get to know the dean and have the dean know me. And that's oftentimes really hard at a huge institution where there are thousands and thousands of faculty members. And so, at the time, in full disclosure, I didn't know whether the sitting associate dean for faculty affairs was interested in the vice dean job or not. But I also looked at the long list of responsibilities that came with that job of vice dean, and maybe I met half of the criteria. So I really didn't go into that process trying or thinking that I was going to end up with the job I was applying for, but I really just did it as a way to for the dean to know who I am, and for some of the other leaders in the medical school to know who I am, so that if and when the right opportunity came along, they would think of me. And I didn't get the vice dean job, and that's good for a lot of reasons. But because I had that interface with the dean and some of the other higher up leaders in the medical school, when the dean called me to tell me that I didn't get that job, he offered me the job that I have now as
Oh,
associate dean for faculty affairs. And he said specifically that there hadn't really been anyone in faculty affairs that was dedicated and focused on our clinical faculty and our clinician educator faculty, which is true. There have been a lot of programming and support for our research faculty and our clinician investigators, but the majority of our faculty are clinical faculty and clinician educator faculty. And so he knew who I was because of the interview process and saw a need, and I guess I kind of also convinced him that there was a need. And so that turned out, obviously hugely in my favor, because now I am getting to do a lot of the work that I have really loved to do and have built my career on, but now at a much larger scale. And so that's just an example of, even if you think that you're not going to get something or you're going to fail, just try anyway, because there are a lot of other benefits to doing that.
oh,
Yeah.
so smart. Super, super smart strategy to use opportunities for roles as a learning experience. To learn, I'm going to learn about myself. I'm going to learn about this kind of a job. I'm going to learn about people who are in this space. I'm going to learn about the culture and strategy and priorities at that level. And also, I'm going to get on people's radar. And look at what happened. That is genius. Such a great application of high emotional intelligence that
Thank
you
you.
don't, yeah, you leveraging opportunities as, hey, this is professional career development. Well, what are you doing applying for a job like that? You know you're never going to get it. That's not the point. I love it. How going into something saying, I just want to get the experience. I want the exposure. I want to get into these people's brains. I want to learn that culture. I want to learn how they think. I want to be able to respond to questions, learn the questions they're going to ask, which will tell me something. And then the questions that they don't ask will also tell me something. And I'm getting FaceTime with people. That
Mhm.
is so smart. Great, great. I
Thank
hope you all listened to that. That's great wisdom from Dr. Carla Spagnoletti.
thank you.
I think we
And
skipped scholarship.
yeah, I think we
Yeah,
did.
let's circle
And
back.
yeah, so we'll go back. This is the turning your everyday work into scholarship is probably my mantra. So I think if you ask the people that work for me and the people that I've mentored along the way, and they said like, what's the biggest lesson that Carla has taught you, or what does she preach all the time? It's that. As clinician educators, we are super busy with patient care. Almost all of us are super busy with patient care, and the educational work that we do doesn't always generate money for the institution,
Right.
and especially the educational scholarship that we do is very rarely funded or has enough funding to support our salaries. And yet, in order to be successful in an academic environment and get promoted, you kind of have to do scholarship. And, that may, whether that be solely in the form of publications or other forms of scholarship, typically you have to find the time to do it on your own time. And I think that that's really challenging, especially now where we're more and more busy clinically and burnout is so prevalent. And to then say to junior faculty that, when you're done doing your charts after 10 hours of work, you should reserve 1 or 2 hours, late at night to work on your scholarship.
Yeah,
And
and your brain
sometimes
is
we do that. I
shot
mean, we all do
and
that.
you're physically exhausted
Yeah,
and you're mentally exhausted and you're
yeah,
emotionally spent. And how can you even have your brain be at its best after all that?
exactly. And it's it's something that I think all academic physicians and scientists do is take work home with them and do work outside of hours and so on and so forth. But I think that in order to be successful as an educational academic, you really have to pair that scholarship with the things that you are doing at work and things that you are getting paid to do. So if you're lucky enough to get some curricular time during a residency curriculum or a medical student curriculum, you're asked to do a course, be a course director or teach within a course. um, take take that time, that curricular time, for example, and not only do your job, deliver on what your job is supposed to be as a teacher, as an educator, but find a way to innovate and find a way to study what you're doing. And so when I say, turn your everyday work into scholarship, I'm constantly thinking about, okay, you have this set of responsibilities. What can you create? What's new? Or what is a good research question that you can ask off of this everyday job that you have? And then look for ways to turn it into scholarship, whether that be submitting an innovation abstract to a national meeting about a lecture that you gave, or turning something into a workshop, or marketing a talk that you give to medical students and residents and sort of switching it up a little bit, and then trying to find people who might want you to be an invited lecturer and give that talk to grand rounds or to a set of faculty at another institution. And then, of course, the evaluating and thinking carefully about the things that you're doing as an educator so that you can actually get data so that you actually can publish it. And so I think that that's kind of where I am at with that specific tip is, in order to be successful academically as an educator, you kind of have to do both at once. You have to
Mhm.
do your job and you have to figure out how to make it scholarly.
And Carla, can you share any tips on how you build teams to do that? I imagine you're not a one-person shop turning all those everyday activities into scholarship. Can you
Right.
give some clear examples of how you could invite other people to share the load and then get co-authorship and you're bringing all ships up to level?
Yes, yes, of course. And that's 100% correct. I am, especially now at this point in my career, it's relatively rare that I would be working on some sort of scholarly endeavor by myself. And part of that, of course, is because I'm busy and I just maybe don't have as much time as I did. Not that I ever felt like I had a ton of time, but mostly because it working in teams and collaborating with others, I think that it's much more fun to do scholarship that way, and I think that it's a way to give back. And so I have had a lot of experience with that, and so my job in working on a project is to help other people build their skills and help other people figure out how to become independent in that work so that they can then lead teams in the future. And so there's lots of examples of that I've had throughout my career, and one of them is even with that early position that I was tasked to do with the medical interviewing curriculum or the patient doctor communication curriculum. I ended up recruiting 4 other fellows and faculty members within the first 2-3 years of doing that to teach different aspects of it. And then together as a team, we would evaluate each portion of it. So we had a motivational interviewing part of it, and we had medical error disclosure part of it. And so for each one of those little mini curriculum within the longitudinal curriculum, we were able to evaluate it, study it, publish it, and we kind of all did that together. So yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Congrats. That's brilliant.
And then last but not least, this is probably the most important one, is building and maintaining relationships. And I think that's true in general in
Yeah.
life, but especially in academic medicine, um, that's really going to be the key to having a fulfilling work environment, a fulfilling career, and being able to really have some control over where your career is going, because you've really put in the time and effort and investment in establishing relationships with the people that you work with people who have similar interests to yours, and even with people who, you might not cross paths with on a regular basis. You never know when you're going to need help from someone or when that person's going to need help from you. And so I just think that it really attention needs to be paid to that part of our professional development. And I think that it typically pays off um, beautifully, almost always.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I tell people all the time is that if you do get yourself into a conflict or a misunderstanding with somebody, address it right away and try to resolve it quickly. So obviously the goal is always to have build and maintain healthy, positive relationships, but we're not perfect, and there's always going to be situations where there's conflict or there's misunderstanding. And so in those situations, really just address it head on.
Yeah. That's key to leadership development. Leadership development is knowing yourself to better manage yourself and then getting insight into others to better manage those relationships. Everything
Mhm.
we do is in relationship. So if you're right, if we can have that insight and that courage and take the time because you're like, oh, I gotta have that difficult, crucial conversation. I really don't want to. Well, if you don't do it now, you're gonna, regret it. It will grow and fester, and you're gonna end up having to spend more time and spinning and ruminating. So nip that in the bud as soon as you can. So I agree with that. This is great.
And that
I love
it's
these.
funny that you mentioned crucial conversations, because that's actually one of the slides that I had in the keynote is read this book. So Crucial Conversations by Patterson et al. I've read it probably 3 or 4 times. And I think that everybody in a professional workplace should definitely read that book and try to adopt the communication skills that it talks about.
Absolutely. Dr. Spagnoletti, this has been wonderful. Thank you for sharing your 5 tips for successful clinical education career. I'd like to leave the final departing comment to you.
Oh, thanks, Kim. So first, thank you so much for having me on today. This has been really fun. You have an amazing podcast, an amazing set of words of wisdom by so many people in academic medicine. Just really impressive. I've learned a lot from others' podcasts as well. So thank you for having me, and I'm happy to come back anytime you want.
Thanks for tuning in to the Faculty Factory podcast. We are a faculty development community sharing tools to build academic leaders in healthcare. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast? Please visit facultyfactory.org/contact and send me a message there. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Office of Faculty Affairs at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas.